Welcome to the Climate Champions. I'm Lee Krevat, and I'm here with John McDonald, IEEE Foundation President and past President of the Power and Energy Society. John, welcome to the Climate Champions.
This is a real treat, Lee. I really appreciate the opportunity.
You can tell I don't memorize things. I make things up as I go along, or otherwise it doesn't work.
That's your improv background.
That's my improv background. You got it. What was your pivotal moment? What made you think that you want to be part of the fight to help battle climate change?
With the work we've done on the electric grid, it's seen the increased extreme weather events. Things that had never happened in the past are not only happening, but they're happening with more frequency. And the impact of those, number of outages, but the length of outages when they occur. What's causing that? There has to be a reason, because we want to find a reason so we can address it and help make it better.
That's like the mission of utility people is, how do we keep reliability? How do we keep the grid up?
We wondered to a customer, how important is resiliency of the grid, reliability? And we actually, when I was at GE, we hired Gallup to help us. And what was interesting was we asked thousands of utility customers all over the U.S., how many of you would pay $10 extra per month on your electric bill if all that extra money went to making the grid more reliable? We're surprised 41% in the eastern half of the U.S. said yes, 34% in the west. And then people say, well, why is the difference in percentage? Think about the people in the east have suffered many more outages, particularly in the northeast, than the western part of the U.S. So the value of resiliency to the eastern customers was much more.
What personally drives you today to help mitigate climate change?
I would say there's a couple things. One is my whole career has been with modernizing the grid, and it's purpose-driven now with climate change with a very strong purpose. The extreme weather events continue to occur at increasing frequency. We're doing things like storm readiness, and we're being more proactive about for utilities to be able to prepare. Don't wait until the storm passed, but prepare for the storm with all the weather data that you can collect.
How can you be proactive?
Yeah, how can you be proactive? And Lee, the second thing is I mentor 30 to 40 young people continuously, and there's such a passion with the young professionals and students with climate change. The young people in the IEEE put together a guidebook on what is the application of AI in energy transition, and the young people asked me to be an advisor for one of the chapters. And so my second driver is I want to help empower the young people with their passion for climate change with 55 years experience that I have in the grid.
Yes. You are a big reason grid modernization happened and happened the way it did. So thank you for that.
Things that are purpose-driven are fun to do.
Yes, agreed. So when people don't understand how climate change is impacting the grid, how do you explain it to them?
The easiest way to explain it to people, particularly non-technical people, is you have to give a lot of examples. You have to give examples like things that they're aware of, things that they experienced, maybe an extreme weather event they experienced, an outage that they experienced. Then they can really relate to it and say, in your lifetime, how often did this happen before the last 5 years? Once or maybe never. And all of a sudden now it's happened twice in the last 5 or 10 years. There's a reason for that.
I remember in 2003 in San Diego, we had a once in 100-year thing. It never happened before, 100 years. And then 4 years later in 2007, it happens again.
Right.
So not once in 100 years anymore.
That's what I mean. So if you could remind people what they experienced and how often it's happening now, they understand that.
You mentioned mentoring. What else do you do to help mitigate climate change right now?
Since I retired from full-time work, let's say I don't have restrictions anymore on helping startups to be on advisory boards. So I'm very selective. I have a lot of opportunities, but I'm very selective. And I really look for those startups that are helping to deal with climate change. Those are the ones I really want to help. And so I'm on advisory boards for startups
That's awesome.
that are addressing climate change in different ways.
Can you talk about how you got where you are today? Because I know you have quite a storied past.
I've never taken the easy road, and I've always looked for the most challenging path. I always want to test myself. I started graduate school my third year and did graduate and undergraduate at the same time. So in 5 years instead of 6. I had a bachelor's, master's, and a full thesis,
Wow.
which today it's a 4+1 program, but back then that was 1971. The major professor I had was world renowned, wrote the first book on how to use digital computer to model a power system. 1968, I started at Purdue in 1969, so the timing was very good. And then the companies I worked for, I've always wanted leadership positions where I could develop technology that had not been done before, where it would help utilities, help customers, help the industry in new ways, very innovative ways. I've always tried to be ahead of where everybody was and anticipate what needs would be and then address those before they occur.
So here we are at Distributech. Boy, the industry has really changed
Right.
during your career. How long have you been coming to Distributech?
If I think back before Distributech, it was DADSM, Distribution Automation, Demand Side Management. Back then, there was a lot of focus on the end-use customer for DSM. And I've been coming 35 years. And so 5 years I came, and then I was asked to be on the advisory committee. And this is my 30th year on the advisory committee.
Wow.
I chair the asset management track. I have a team of 8 people, and we reviewed 180 abstracts for that track. And then I teach 2 half-day courses on the first day of the conference, which I did on Monday.
You're very involved in
Very
Distributech.
well.
I'm glad you are. I'm very glad you are. Can you talk about setbacks you've had in your career, things that didn't go as well?
Yeah, which I look at those as, we say, cleverly disguised opportunities, right, to do better. A setback would never stop me from doing something, but it would say, how can I be more resourceful to still pursue what I want to do with the setback? I think the hardest thing for me, I really have a passion for what I do, and I'm readily accept leadership positions. And I've had very high leadership positions at companies as well as in the industry. And I think the hardest thing is dealing with people that don't agree with you. They make it difficult for you to do what you want to do, or say one thing and do another. I think the setbacks, the things that hurt the most, were not technical, but they were more cultural. It's good experience for all of us to deal with those, because that's the real world, and it makes you stronger, hopefully, and resourceful. So those are the things that stick out of my mind. Without getting specific, there were some really difficult situations that turned out well. But when I was in the middle of it, it was tough, very tough.
You're the first person that has talked about a setback in terms of being hurt because of people and how they acted. And that is a beautiful thing. I'm really glad you brought it up, because if I look back at my career, I might give a technical example as a setback, but really it's the people, when you give trust and maybe don't get it back, or you think somebody has your back and they don't. Those are the things that really stick with you.
They do. They do, because I trust everybody. I give people the benefit of the doubt. I've been burned by some multiple times. People say, why did you give that person a second chance? I say, well, I err on that side.
Yes.
I'd rather do that than not. I love helping people and helping them be successful.
But that's a huge strength too. Isn't that a huge strength, that you trust people? Because you get so much more done if you start with that basis.
You do. And hopefully, Lee, by doing that, you empower them because of your trust. They're driven, they're empowered they're inspired to do even more than what they were going to do.
There's a book, Zap. It's a management book, Zap. When I read it, I said, that is my philosophy, to empower people.
Yes.
I had you talk about your setback. What successes are you most proud of?
From a work point of view, I think it's having significant contributions to the industry and leaving a legacy. I've always felt, being an industry person, I was never required to write a paper or a book. Obviously, if you're in academics, it was publish or perish. You have to. But I've written over 150 papers and articles. I've co-authored 5 books, which I didn't have to do. That you do that on your own time. But what's important to me is all the knowledge I have and experience that other people have helped me get. I want to leave that for others to learn from. And also, you would relate to this too. When you or I have faced with an industry challenge, right? With all the experience you have with me, we look at it and it's obvious to us what should be done. And we voice that to people and they look at us like, I don't understand, or I don't agree with you, or they say, it's obvious to me. And sometimes I get so frustrated, my way of venting would be to write a paper or a chapter in a book. I said, this is so obvious to me. Don't you guys get it? I said, okay, I'm gonna write it down and publish it, and I'm gonna convince lots of people that this is what we should do. And that was that emotion, that drive would cause me to sit down and write something.
That's very exciting. I would try to get people to figure it out so it was theirs and not mine. That was my little trick.
Right.
And then years later, they would say they thought of that thing. And I'm like, yeah, you thought of that thing. When you look at the future, next 20, 30 years, with regards to climate change, with regard to our industry, what do you think it's going to look like?
There's no question about, for one, is the penetration of distributed energy resources that continues to grow. To me, the best reference that I've read recently is Energy 2040, the book by Professor Deepak Dhawan at Georgia Tech and Suresh Sharma. Here's two brilliant entrepreneurs and academics who sat down and forecasted what the energy industry would be like at 2040. And it's not subjective. These guys are smart, a lot of experience. But I think one is the penetration of renewables continues to grow. Second is we're going to see much more innovation, continue to see innovation in how do we deal with the intermittency of the distributed energy resources. I always say, when you come home at night, turn the lights on, flip the switch, you want the lights to come on. What if the sun's not shining or the wind's not blowing? What provides you that electricity? There's innovations that continue to be needed. A better business case for energy storage, more efficiency with energy storage.
We've always said that's the nirvana, right? Energy storage, inexpensive energy storage.
Inexpensive energy storage, but also different chemistries of energy storage, because one chemistry is ideal for instantaneous frequency response.
Yes.
But a different chemistry for peak load deferral.
Yes.
Power versus energy.
And then long-term, how do we do long-term energy storage?
Yeah, so you have to keep that in mind. Third thing, which I've spent a lot of time with, is who would have thought 10, 12 years ago our industry would hire data scientists?
Yes.
That has revolutionized our industry. We've gone from reactive to proactive with respect to asset management, which is don't wait till the transformer blows up and destroys the substation. What's health information we can get from the transformer?
There's a startup company that they could tell you a couple of years in front if things are starting to look awry, and it's inexpensive to apply.
That's right. You think of the cost versus benefits. The cost is low compared to you're preventing multi-million-dollar asset, plus the circuit breakers, the substation.
And a big outage.
Yeah. Which you may need to buy electricity from somebody else at market prices. So to me, the potential for what we can do, I have a slide that's the journey to digital transformation, reactive, predictive, and autonomous. And we're really halfway up the journey. So as I look to the future with more machine learning on data, artificial intelligence, and more simulation with digital twins, we can go much further. And I think that, the full digitized grid, we've done digitized substations, but now we look at the whole grid. And I see that we're on that path. And that's exciting.
It's very exciting. So you talked about mentorship before. What advice do you have for people that want to help with climate change or help get them into the industry? What should they be looking at?
I think first, I really think, especially a young person, two things. One is you want to have as many internships, co-ops. You want to have as much work experience as you can while you're a student. And this is why mentorship is so important. To a student, they're learning the science of engineering, is what I call it. Textbooks, courses, professors, but everybody's doing that. The value you bring to a company when you graduate is the art of engineering. That's what they're looking for. How do you apply the science in the real world? You can't learn that in a book, and you can't learn it quickly. And to be able to address climate change, to me, you need to have a good foundation in the science of engineering. So you have credibility, Lee. So when you lead a group, when you write a paper, when you give a talk, the underpinnings of it are strong with the science. But then the work experience shows people, how do you apply this in the real world? And people can relate with what you're saying because it's taking the science and bringing it down the real world in a way that people can understand and say, this will be helpful. So that's what I counsel young people, find at least one experienced person and spend as much time with them as you can. Learn the art of engineering, but have a strong foundation in power systems, big data,
There's a lot to learn.
The challenges we solve today are interdisciplinary more so than before. Before we'd have specialists. A young person, you don't want to be a specialist anymore. The teams we need to solve problems today are interdisciplinary. Different fields need to come together.
Yeah. Do you have any questions for me?
One would be, I love the fact that you've taken your passion for climate change, and in addition to being a champion yourself, it's really powerful to find other people that have experience that have been doing this and showcase how they feel, what they know, what their experience is. Like we said, you want to leave a legacy for others, like writing papers, books. You know, the more you can put information out there, the better off all of us are. So I always say that when we do something, we want to provide benefits at 3 levels. The individual, yourself. 2 would be the company you work for. You want to help the company. But 3 is the industry in general. That drives us to how could we help the industry in general. So my question would be, in these podcasts, one thing that you'll never forget, one thing you've learned that you didn't expect from a person or a group of people.
Well, I interviewed somebody, he was a professor at Carnegie Mellon, and he made me cry.
Really?
By talking about how he had gone vegan and how he was trying to get his kids and set an example about how we can help the earth, and how that became more of his mission even than his job, was just how he would help his kids to be examples in the future, even when they were young. And I don't know, it just struck me that he cared so much that he was trying to model this behavior, even though his kids were so young at such a young age.
That's an interesting driver, that you're driven by your kids and your grandkids.
I know you have a lot of grandkids.
I have 4 grandkids.
Yes.
And you think about them and the world that they'll grow up in.
Yes.
And, you know, at some point in their life, you won't be around yourself, and they'll be on their own.
Hey, is there anything else you want to say? Please, any bit of philosophy for us, anything.
In the IEEE Power and Energy Society, we've actually prepared some reports on climate change. Some people might say, well, what resources might be available? Like recent resources, you know, that might be helpful. And I just want to say there are resources out there within the last 2-3 years where a group of experienced people have gotten together who are passionate about climate change to write reports or books and things to help others. So I think it's not like you're on your own and you're trying to find information. There are resources, very good resources that are out there. So, you know, take advantage of those.
Yes, agreed.
Yeah.
And on that note, I'm going to wrap this up with wrap. I love the way you said that we had to work together if we want to stop these extreme events, the crazy weather. You know, a lot of times the infrastructure isn't very pliable, so we need to figure out ways like software of making the grid more reliable. I know you love it when you meet a young person who's maybe a future inventor, and that's why you decide the way you're going to give back is to mentor. You started getting involved in power in 1968, and now you're helping everybody else to innovate. When I asked you about a difficult thing, you didn't skirt. Instead, you talked about how sometimes a personal relationship going wrong can hurt. It's true, we need tons of experience. We have to get smarter and know how to do things. It can't be that we just have a reliance on education, but it's still really important that we understand the science. So much of what's here at Distributech, it's you it was built upon. If you stop being involved, that would be such a con. I'm so glad that you're still here, that you are not gone. Thank you so much, John.
Unbelievable, Lee. I don't know how you did that.
Happy to do it with you.
That was so nice. So personal, too. Appreciate that.
Thank you so much for sitting down with me here and talking, especially at Distributech. This is special for me.
Well, it's special. We've done so many things together over the years.
I know.
It's special. I think about those articles we've written together, boards we've served on.
Yeah. Thanks again, man.